Quran says, nothing shall befall us save what God has written down for us. But the philosophers modify that. They say, life is not a game of chess where you are free to choose your moves all the time. It's rather a game of backgammon. Destiny determines the throw of the dice, but it still leaves you enough freedom to win or to lose the game. After these introductory remarks, let me turn now to our major concern at the present time. That is the revolution. Every regime calls itself revolutionary, though most of the processes by which these regimes came to power would be more accurately described by such terms as coup d'etat in French, or putsch in German, or pronunciamiento in Spanish. It is a major event, a major transformation. It is a revolution in the sense in which we speak of the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution. And it's interesting to compare the Iranian Revolution with both of those. Both the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution had an enormous impact over the regions which used to be called Christendom. In the same way, the Iranian Revolution had an enormous impact over the whole world of Islam. Like the French Revolution, like the Russian Revolution, we see, first of all, divisions within the revolution. There are Jacobins and Girondins, there are Bolsheviks and Bolsheviks. We see similar internal conflicts within the Iranian Revolution, and this has been going on all the time. We can also, I think, distinguish certain phases in the history of the revolution. The Iranian Revolution, I think, has now entered into what one might call the Napoleonic or the Stalin phase. Now, in any kind of conflict, it is quite useful, if not indeed necessary, to identify and define the enemy. Well, there are several levels of definition. One of them is what you might call the internal Islamic one. Iran is predominantly and dominantly Shiite, and there is the old cleavage within Islam between the Sunnis and the Shia. I don't want to go into details on that. Merely let me say this. It's often been said that the difference between the Sunni and the Shia Muslims is like that between the Protestants and Catholics in Christianity. To which I would say, well then, which are the Protestants and which are the Catholics? The question is unanswerable because it's meaningless. There's absolutely no resemblance at all. Iran is dominantly and predominantly Shiite, and they see their mission as to establish Shiite dominance within Islam. This immediately raises questions in a number of countries where there are Shiite populations subject to Sunni domination. The first, which I would have included in that until not so long ago, is Iraq. Iraq is a country where the population, as far as we know, has in majority been Shiite, as far back as we can trace the history. But all that time it has been under Sunni domination. From medieval times, through the Caliphate, through the Ottomans, through the British rule, through the monarchy. I would have to describe it accurately. I think I would have to borrow a word from Irish history and call it a Sunni ascendancy. Now that has changed. And the Shia at last, the Shia majority at last, are apparently taking over in Iraq. But that raises interesting questions. When the Iraqi Shia were dominated by the Sunnis, they tended to look to the Iranians as their natural supporters and friends. More important at the present time, and also clearer, are the very large and significant Shia minorities, sometimes even local majorities, in other countries of the region, in all the Gulf states, in Saudi Arabia, all the way around the Gulf and southwards. These are countries dominated by Sunni regimes, but containing important, sometimes locally, majority Shia populations. These are now very much, shall we say, of interest to the Iranians and their revolution, and are a subject of great concern to the Sunni regimes that dominate those countries. Then, of course, there's the regional aspect. Iran, the present rulers of Iran, are aiming at regional domination. That is, of course, phase one. And who is their regional rival, their regional enemy? Well, for the moment, they seem to see Israel as the main alternative. And their hostility and their intentions have been made clear in their various pronouncements on the subject. But we have to remember that that is only phase one of the struggle, or rather phase two. Phase one is at home. Phase two is in the region. Phase three is the global final one. The final struggle, or rather, the final phase of the ongoing struggle, which has continued since the advent of Islam in the 7th century of the Common Era, between the two rival religions, Islam and Christianity. Now, as the Muslims see it, in modern times, the leadership of the world of the infidels was contested in a final phase between the two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. They say, we have defeated and destroyed the one, dealing with the pampered and effeminate Americans would be comparatively easy. It's important to bear in mind that this global perception and this terminal historical perception is an important part of their worldview. Every religion, well, I shouldn't say that, but most religions, anyway, those that I know of, have a sort of end-of-time scenario. The time when the Messiah or his equivalent comes or returns, when the final battles take place between the forces of good and the forces of evil, or if you like, between God and the devil. And then after various battles, the forces of good triumph, the evildoers are sent to eternal damnation, and the true believers go to the delights of paradise, which are set forth in specific detail. For people with this apocalyptic mindset, mutual assured destruction is not a deterrent, it's an inducement. Let me proceed and end with some quotations which I think are relevant and helpful to understand. Here's one from Khomeini. 1 billion Muslims should unite and defeat America. These are his words, translated of course. This was basically the prime purpose of the Iranian Revolution. That, as he explained, was what it was all about for him and for his followers. That is to say, confronting the ultimate enemy, the great Satan, the leading power of the world of the unbelievers. There was a great Satan and a little Satan, but compared with the great Satan, the little Satan is of relatively minor importance. Another quotation from Khomeini. The Americans will run away, meaning from the Middle East, leaving their illegitimate child, meaning Israel, behind them. And then the Muslims will know what to do. Ahmadinejad, when addressing the Arabs particularly, uses that formula, but has used it many times. And he also makes the point that the Middle East has become the central battleground between the Muslims and the infidels, meaning the West. In other words, since it is now the central ground of the cosmic struggle, it is the Middle East that matters. It is now the battleground between the two global forces, the force of good and the force of evil. The Iranians are moving probably quite rapidly towards a nuclear weapon. The idea of a nuclear weapon in the hands of people with this apocalyptic mindset is really terrifying. And therefore, the argument is one must do what is necessary to stop it, if necessary, by military attack. Now, I should say, Iran must not have nuclear weapons. Try to look at this from the point of view of an Iranian patriot. You will say, what is this? We have a nuclear-armed Russia to the north, a nuclear-armed China to the east, a nuclear-armed India and Pakistan to the south, a nuclear-armed Israel to the west. Who is to tell us that we must not have nuclear arms? One can obviously see what is wrong with the argument. But I think one has to recognize the force of this argument and the way in which many Iranians might respond to this. Thanks to the wonders of modern communication, it is now possible to carry on communication with people in Iran, with opposition groups. And one has a fairly good idea of the strength and extent of these opposition groups. We were given a dramatic example of it fairly recently in the response to the rigged elections, that people were willing to risk their lives again and again and again in demonstrations against this utterly ruthless regime. I think is an indication of the strength and determination of the opposition within Iran. The possibility must be recognized that if all else fails, the military may be the only option.